As we continue our sermon series, Living in HD, in high definition, I think that there's a very appropriate subject that we need to discuss today. And that's living a life of compassion. You know, we've got a problem in our world today that people just aren't as compassionate as they used to be or as compassionate as they should be. Story is told about a little boy named Johnny that came downstairs just crying just so loudly it really bothered his mother, and she ran to him and said, "Johnny, what's the matter?" She said, "Dad was hanging up the picture upstairs and he banged his thumb with a hammer." And he says, "That's not serious." But the mother says, "I know you're upset, but a big boy like you shouldn't cry at something like that. Why didn't you just laugh?" And he said, "I did." Sometimes there's no compassion in the home. Sometimes in the workplace. As I see a lot of these young people getting out of school, getting out of college, trying to find jobs, it's rough out there. And the story is told about this young man that he graduated from college and he went to interview for a job. And as he goes in, the human resource person asked this engineer, fresh out of college, from Texas A&M, "And what starting salary were you looking to get?" Well, the young man said, "Oh, in the neighborhood of $125,000 a year, depending on the benefits package." The interviewer said, "Well, what would you say to a package of 5 weeks paid vacation, 14 paid holidays, full medical and dental and eye, a company matching retirement fund for 50% of your salary, and a company car lease every 2 years, say a red Corvette?" The engineer sat up in his seat and he says, "Wow, are you kidding?" And the guy says, "Yeah, but you started it." No compassion. No compassion. I want to ask you something. If you were working in this place, would you have compassion? There's a mute who wants to buy a toothbrush. By imitating the action of brushing one's teeth, he successfully expresses himself to the shopkeeper, and the purchase is done. Now let me ask you this, with the eyes of compassion. If a blind man came into the store wishing to buy a pair of sunglasses, how should he express himself? Any ideas? He can ask for the sunglasses. You got it, Sheila. But I'm sure you said that with compassion, didn't you? In our world today, people, no matter where, in the workplace, at home, among family or friends, sometimes lacks compassion. On the news this past week, did you hear about the man that drowned? And teenagers had their cell phone, and they were recording this man drowning in a pond, and they were taunting him and laughing about it, and the man ends up drowning and dying. These are 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. Where's the compassion? Where is it? Anymore, we watch television, we see commercials for children that are hungry, and we just let it go. We see commercials with Sarah McLachlan singing about animals to rescue them and take care of them. You see the sad little puppy eyes, and we dismiss it. We've become a hardened people, not compassionate. Some of it's because we see people taking advantage of the system. Any exit ramp that you get off of, there's somebody there holding up a sign, "Will work for food, single mother with 10 children, needs food." We see these things and we've become a hardened people. But we need to learn, especially as Christians, to live a life of compassion. A man fell into a pit and couldn't get himself out. Some different people walked by, and here was their responses. A subjective person came along and said, I feel for you down there. The objective person walked by and said, it's logical that someone would fall down in that pit. A Pharisee walks by and says, only bad people fall into pits. A reporter walks by and wants the exclusive story on what happened in the pit. An IRS agent asks if he was paying taxes while in the pit. A self-pitying person said, you haven't seen anything until you've seen my pit. A fire and brimstone preacher says, you deserve that pit. A psychologist noted, your mother and father are the blame for your being in that pit. A self-esteem expert said, believe in yourself and you can get out of the pit. An optimist said, things could be worse. The pessimist said, things couldn't get any worse. But Jesus walks by, he looks down and he takes the man by the hand and he lifts him out of the pit. Who cares today? Who cares? Do you? I wonder how many lives have ended with those words, who cares? There are many people asking that question today. And we, as the ambassadors for Jesus Christ, need to show the world that we care and that Christ cares. But what are we doing to show that we care? Well, some say, well, I have sympathy. I feel bad for those people. You may have said it yourself. But sympathy requires just having feeling. Compassion means sympathy accompanied by actions. We need to express compassion. And I want us to look at some of the requirements that need to take place in our lives and in the world so that compassion can be a part of our lives and we can live in HD. First of all, in order to show compassion, you have to see a need. Too many people walk through life ignoring or being so focused on their own lives and their own situation that they can't see the needs of other people. They can't see other people that are hurting. Have you ever been in a great need and feel like people are looking right through you? Like they don't know what's going on in your life? Like they just don't care? A little girl's prayer. Little girl was being punished by eating alone in the corner of the dining room. The family paid no attention to her until they heard her pray, I thank thee, Lord, for preparing a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Many times we feel like that. We think the church should be there showing us love, reaching out to us in our time of need, and we're ignored. We're in the hospital and we get no visitors or cards. We're in the nursing home and people don't come and see us or call or even send us a note saying, we miss you. Or someone isn't here in church for several weeks and nobody contacts them. We need to try to see the needs to show compassion. Some people have developed the art of looking without seeing. Some people have developed a cover-up attitude. They have a facade, a camouflage, a mask, a disguise. In order to see a need, I must look beyond the exterior of a person. Some people put up that front. You ask them, they walk in the door, how are you today? Oh, I'm just wonderful. Everything's terrific. But deep down, they are hurting. They've had a bad day. They've had a bad week. They've had a bad year. We have to pray that God gives us spiritual eyes to see and then do something about it. Secondly, in order to show compassion, you must care. Do we care? Or are we just superficial? Do we really care about people? Do you ask people when you see them, hey, how you doing? Do you really want to know Do you? Do you really take time to listen? If they tell you, well, I lost my job. Oh, that's great. I have a good day. And we move on. We don't even hear what people say. We need to care enough to listen. Care enough to take the time. We're too busy, folks. We are too busy in our lives today. And if we're too busy for God and too busy for His people, then folks, you're too busy. That's our priority. That's our business. Going back to Charles Dickens and what he said that Scrooge made the statement about the poor. And Marley tells him that people are your business. We need to show compassion. We need to care. Some of us may be able to sympathize with the fellow who received a phone call from his wife as he was getting ready to fly home from Europe, or as she was getting ready to fly home from Europe. She says, "Honey, how's the cat?" "Cat's dead," he answers. "Oh, honey, why did you have to be so honest with me? Why didn't you break the news to me slowly? You've just ruined my whole trip," she says. "What do you mean?" he asks. "You should have told me that he was on the roof whenever I called here from London. When I got to Paris and called, you should have said that he's acting a little sluggish. And whenever I got to Berlin, you should have said that he was sick. And when I called you when I got back to New York, you should have said that you'd taken him to the vet. Then when I arrived home, you could have said to me, the cat died. And it would have been so much easier for me, and I would have enjoyed my trip. By the way," she says, "how's Mom?" After a long pause, he said, "She's on the roof." Psalms 142:4 says, "I look for someone to come and help me, but no one gives me a passing thought. No one will help me. No one cares a bit what happens to me." That's how King David felt in his low times. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt alone? That nobody cares? Well, we must care so that we can show compassion. Too many have the "they made their own bed, let them lie in it" attitude. Now, sometimes that has to be said. But initially, we need to show compassion. But if the person continues that lifestyle and will not listen, then there comes a time we need to let go. But initially, we need to show compassion and show that you care. Compassion is not a snob gone slumming type of thing. There are those... You ever watch the old reruns of the show Maude? It's on right now, and we've been recording it and watching it. And Maude is what they refer to her on the show as one of these bleeding heart liberals that is trying to help people that are less fortunate, that are minority groups, and doing these things. And she cares more about that and what color their skin is or what their background is than about them as a person. The idea that she has in that show is, I want to help you, and I'm going to go slumming to do so because it makes me feel better. It relieves my guilt. Folks, that's not the reason that we should care, to relieve our guilt. How many of you, whenever you see somebody standing alongside the road with their hand out and a sign, and especially if they look really sad or they're old or that, you give out of guilt? That shouldn't be our motivation. Our motivation should be, we're going to help because we care. Not because we're sitting there and they're staring at us and we want them to leave us alone. We do it because we care. You see, motivation is just as important as action to God. Why we do things is just as important to God as us doing them. God's people have got to care. Jeremiah was concerned over his generation. In Jeremiah 9:1, he writes, "Oh, that my eyes were a fountain of tears. I would weep forever. I would sob day and night for all my people who have been slaughtered." Jeremiah cared, and he wept because of that care. When's the last time you wept because of your care for someone and what they're going through? Paul was concerned over the people of his day. In Romans 9:1-3, it says, "In the presence of Christ, I speak with utter truthfulness. I do not lie, and my conscience and the Holy Spirit confirm that what I am saying is true. My heart is filled with bitter sorrow and unending grief for my people, my Jewish brothers and sisters. I would be willing to be forever cursed, cut off from Christ, if that would save them." Anybody here willing to give up their soul for someone else? That's care. That's how Paul felt. He said, if I could give up my salvation so that my people could be saved, I'd do it. I can't say that about very many people. That's true care for others. Jesus demonstrated his concern constantly. In Matthew 9:36, he said he felt great pity for the crowds that came because their problems were so great and they didn't know where to go for help. They were like sheep without a shepherd. Now, Jesus cared, and he cares about you. When you feel all alone, when you feel that you're by yourself going through a problem, going through a trial, don't forget Christ is there and he cares about you. He cared so much about you that he sent his only son to die on a cross so that you would have the opportunity to be with him forever. Our country, and yes, our churches, need a fresh anointing of concern. Psalms 126:5-6, David writes, "Those who plant in tears will harvest with the shouts of joy. They weep as they go to plant their seed, but they sing as they return with the harvest." Do you care about people? Do you care about people's souls? Do you care about whether people are going to heaven or not? If so, what are you doing about it? Are you setting an example to others of how Christ wants us to live so that they can learn and they can follow? Do you talk to them about your faith? Do you even invite them to come to church? How much do you care about others? Which brings me to the last point. In order to show compassion, you got to do something. You can't just sit back and say, "Oh, I feel bad," and "Oh, I care about them." You've got to back it up with action. The true compassion that we need to have requires it. Sympathy is about feeling. Compassion is about doing. Compassion is what the world needs. A word of caution: use wisdom when you're doing. Don't help too much. And sometimes we get into that. Sometimes with family and friends, we want to help too much and we become enablers. The best way sometimes we can help someone is to let them fail and not do everything for them. Because what happens when you're gone? I've seen this happen. I've seen people that are my age still depending upon mom and dad to bail them out. And mom and dad get sick and mom and dad die, and these people are on their own and they don't know what to do. They're in their 50s and they don't know how to operate. It's okay to help, it's okay to do, but don't become enablers. And I say this to parents. I know it's hard. It's hard not to, because you love your kids, you love your grandkids, you care about them, but we show compassion, and if we just keep giving too much, we end up creating the spoiled child syndrome. I deserve this. I have this coming to me. Our country has done that, folks. We've got second, third, fourth, and even fifth generations that are on welfare. That's their way of life. And not only are they on welfare, but they expect it. It's okay to help people. That's what it was set up for, but it shouldn't become a way of life. And don't allow that to become a way of life as you help others as well. We've had people come here to the church and ask for help, and we have helped them. But there also comes a time that you have to say enough's enough. And you need to step up, stand on your own 2 feet. Show them what they need to do to pull themselves up rather than continuing to give them. Remember, it is trouble that often drives men to the only true source of trust, God. Sometimes people need to fail. They need to be down and out so that they can look. They have nowhere else to look but up. And that's when they find God. And that's when they find their faith. And that's when they begin to grow. The best way we can show compassion is not to give out food, not to give out money, not to pay electric and gas bills, not to watch somebody's kids so that they can go to work. The best way we can show compassion is to share Jesus Christ with others. Because all these things that we're giving, physical things, are just temporary and just as a Band-Aid. But if we share Christ and we share our faith, then people will grow, and people will come to know Christ, and people will be saved. One day, a 95-year-old woman was at a nursing home, received a visit from an old friend from church. She was asked by the visitor, "How are you feeling today?" "Oh," said the lady, "I'm just worried sick." "What are you worried about, dear?" her friend asked. "You look like you're in good health." "They're taking good care of you, aren't they?" "Oh, yes, they're taking very good care of me." "Are you in pain?" she asked. "No, I haven't been sick for years." "Well, what are you worried about?" her friend asked again. The lady leaned back in her rocking chair and slowly explained her major worry. "Every close friend I have ever had has already died and gone to heaven. And I know what they're like. I'm afraid they're all wondering where I went." Do you ever wonder where people are going to end up when they leave this world? That should be a concern. That should be our first concern. If we truly have care and compassion for others, then we want to take them to heaven with us, don't we? And if they get mad at us or they shun us here in this life, isn't it worth making the effort? Would you rather have your feelings hurt or your family and friends burning in hell for eternity? Which is more important? Which shows the most compassion? We need to share our faith, share Jesus with others. And I want to ask you all a question. Do you need help this morning? In order for someone to help you, you got to want it. Do you want help this morning? Are you struggling with a sin in your life? Are you struggling with something internally that nobody else knows about? Do you want help with that? In order for someone to help you, though, you have to want it and you have to ask for the help. Don't be so proud. Don't be afraid that you're being weak. We all have weaknesses, folks. We need to put pride aside, humble ourselves, and ask for the help that we need. And in order for someone to help you, you got to be willing to accept the help. Christian, if you see a need, care about it. And be willing to do something. Because when we do, that's when we live a life of concern.